It was a grey Tuesday afternoon when Ellie wandered down the wrong street and stumbled upon a small brick building she'd never noticed before. Tucked between a laundromat and a boarded-up bakery, it looked like it had been there for 100 years. The wooden sign above the door read simply, "Library," no fancy title, no open hours, just that one word, faded with time. But before that day, Ellie was tired. Not just the kind of tiredness you fix with a nap or a weekend off. It was the kind of tiredness that sat in your bones, that lived behind your eyes. She was 32, a marketing manager at a fast-paced agency. She lived by her calendar, breathed by her inbox, and measured her worth by checklists and productivity graphs. Her morning started before the sun, a snoozed alarm, a scroll through emails, before her feet even touched the floor. Coffee while replying to Slack messages. Breakfast, usually forgotten. Lunch, usually eaten over a keyboard, if at all. Dinner, often skipped, delayed, or ordered in. Reheated leftovers she barely tasted. She was always busy, but never quite present. Her phone buzzed constantly. Work notifications, unread messages, calendar reminders. Even silence felt loud, like she was missing something important. Like she should be doing more, being more. She hadn't read a book in over 2 years. She used to love writing. But now, even journaling felt like another item on her to-do list. Weekends were spent recovering, not living. Her world was efficient, organized, fast, and deeply, painfully empty. That's why the quiet caught her off guard. When she turned down that unfamiliar street, something inside her stilled, like her soul had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. She pushed open the door to the library. Warm light spilled out from shaded lamps. Dust floated like snowflakes through golden beams. Wooden shelves towered in every direction, stuffed not only with books but with trinkets. Teacups, pine cones, framed photographs, tiny notes tucked between pages. "Hello," Ellie called out. A voice from the back replied, "Welcome! Pick any chair you like." A woman emerged from behind a shelf, a librarian presumably. She was elderly, with silver hair pinned in a bun, a cardigan 2 sizes too big, and eyes that seemed to see not just who Ellie was, but who she had been, and maybe even who she could be. "No need to sign in," she said kindly. "The stories will remember you." Ellie blinked. She didn't know what that meant, but she sat down. She picked a book at random, a field guide to whimsy and wonder. It was handwritten. Inside were sketches of tree houses, imaginary maps, and notes about different types of clouds. Ellie turned page after page, caught in a quiet spell. She read until the light outside began to dim. It wasn't until then that she realized there were no clocks. She hadn't seen one since she entered. She left reluctantly, but she returned the next day, and the next. Each day, the librarian had something new waiting. A poetry book with a pressed daisy inside. A collection of letters between strangers who never met. A recipe book annotated with little messages like, "Best served under starlight." Others came too. An old man who always left behind little drawings. A woman in a yellow raincoat who pressed fresh flowers into books. A boy who whispered stories to the spines of novels as if they could hear him. No one spoke much, but no one needed to. And one day, Ellie brought a notebook. She hadn't written for herself in years. Not since college, maybe. But now the words poured out like long overdue rain. She wrote about her childhood dog, the tree she used to climb, the quiet ache in her chest she had never named. And then she wrote about the day her mother died. Halfway through the paragraph, her hand froze. She stared at the ink, and then the tears came. Sudden, silent at first, then crashing. Years of buried emotions spilling out in sobs she didn't know she had in her. "I'm sorry," she gasped, wiping her face. I don't know why, but the librarian only smiled gently. "Good, let the paper hold it for a while." It was the first time Ellie realized how much she had been carrying. Weeks passed. Ellie laughed more. She slept better. The tension in her shoulders eased. She stopped checking her phone at the door. Instead, she lingered by the window, watching dust float in warm light, and one evening, as snow began to fall outside, she finally asked, "Why no clocks?" The librarian looked up from her knitting and said, "Because the stories know when you're ready, and time behaves differently here. It listens." That night, Ellie left behind a short story she had written about a girl who found peace in a quiet place. She slipped it between the pages of a travel guide and smiled. But one morning, a week later, she returned to the street, and the library was gone. Just brick wall. No door. No wooden sign. Nothing. She froze, blinking, her breath misting in the cold. She walked up and down the block, checked the bakery, looked for anything that might hint it had ever been there. Nothing. She returned the next day, and the next, but it never came back. She felt grief, real grief, as if she'd lost a dear friend. The one place where she had truly, finally been herself. The one space that asked for nothing, yet gave everything. She felt hollow, untethered, lonely. But gradually, something inside her shifted. She found herself waking early, not to scroll, but to sit in silence with a notebook in her lap. She began writing again. Not just memories, but poems, observations, little fragments of wonder. She brought her notebook everywhere. Cafes, parks, the train. Sometimes she wrote. Sometimes she just watched the world go by. And more often than not, she found herself smiling. One afternoon, she visited the city's public library, the fluorescent-lit, busy kind she used to ignore. It wasn't the same, but it didn't have to be. She wandered the shelves, paused at the art of stillness, and slipped a handwritten note between the pages. It read, "It's okay to slow down. The world will still be here when you're ready." A friend who forgot and then remembered. She started leaving notes like that everywhere. Under coffee sleeves, on elevator walls, in borrowed books. And on Sunday evenings, she'd curl up in her attic, a space she quietly transformed into her own little library. A pot of tea, a soft chair, a shelf filled with books that made her feel something. No clock on the wall. Just a sign that read, "Welcome. No need to sign in. The stories will remember you." Ellie's job was still demanding. The world outside still rushed. But now, she moved through it differently. She knew how to pause, how to breathe, how to listen. The library had taught her that healing doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives in the stillness, in quiet spaces where you are allowed to feel everything and still be enough. And she finally understood what the librarian meant when she said, "You built a library here." Because the real magic wasn't in the brick building. It was in the way she chose to live. Now every week she made time for the place that had no time. Because when you make space for silence, stories will find you, and they will wait. Without pressure, without a deadline, without a clock.